You are listening to Kubernetes Bytes, a podcast bringing you the latest from the world of cloud-native data management. My name is Ryan Wallner, and I'm joined by Bhavin Shah, coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. We'll be sharing our thoughts on recent cloud-native news and talking to industry experts about their experiences and challenges managing the wealth of data in today's cloud-native ecosystem. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. We're coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. Today is October 8th, 2021, and I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. So let's dive into it. Bhavin, how are you? What have you been up to?
I'm doing good. I've been kind of busy. So last weekend we had like an impromptu New York City trip.
Nice.
Trying out a lot of new bars, speakeasies, and restaurants. So that's always fun. But I'm looking forward to this weekend because I just want to take a break. Last weekend we drove on Friday for like 6 hours and then Sunday for 4 hours, and it was like, this is too much work to do on a weekend. Even though if it was for fun, but yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, and you're
How about you?
heading out to KubeCon, right? So might as well take a break before you do that, right?
Yes, next week is KubeCon.
I have not been up to a whole lot. As you can tell, I'm coming off of a little bit of a cold, COVID negative. Don't worry about it, everybody. I'm okay. Yeah, having a cold is no fun no matter what type of bug it is. So I haven't done much lately other than trying to get my work done and rest up. But trying to enjoy this fall weather. Here in New England, there's massive amounts of things to do. So various Oktober fests and those type of things, which is, always fun.
Yeah, I'm waiting for peak foliage. I want to drive up to the White Mountains, but I was like, I don't know if that's worth it yet. Maybe maybe not next weekend. So we'll see.
You can get peak foliage and really good views if you don't drive up there too. Trees are everywhere.
Thanks for the tip.
It's more of a warning that it gets very busy up there. I spend some time in Lincoln, New Hampshire, in the fall and in the spring. And I prefer the spring because there's just so many people there. Yeah. Leaf peeping, right? It is beautiful though. So if you're gonna just go for it, we'll see how it is.
I'll update the team.
Okay, so today's show is really exciting. We do have another guest on the show, Kai Davenport. I'm really excited to have Kai on the show. I've had the pleasure of working with him in the past when I was at Cluster HQ, and Kai is a bit of a jack of all trades, so he's full of knowledge, full of experience, and I'm really excited to see what he has to say about running Kubernetes as a team of one. He does a lot of development and various projects for customers that he works directly with and runs them on Kubernetes himself. And so we're really interested to know, how do you do it and what does it really do for you? So this is a really exciting topic. That should be
nice.
Fun.
He's a developer and operator wrapped into one.
Exactly. Jack of all trades. Great. So before we dive into that, let's cover the news. I know you've been tracking a lot lately, so why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, so this week was VMworld. Even though it was like a virtual event this year, they still had a lot of announcements around the Tanzu ecosystem in different keynotes and solution keynotes and some deep dive technical sessions. One of the key things that I really liked, and actually this was announced a day before VMworld as part of the DevOps loop one day event that they had, was VMware Tanzu Community Edition. This is a distribution that's free to download. You can run it locally on your PC or Mac on Docker, or you can run it on AWS or Azure. It gives you all the different things that are included in the Tanzu project. So if you are looking for it, it uses cluster API to deploy TKG clusters or Tanzu clusters. But then it also gives you the option of deploying Prometheus and Grafana. It uses Valero and Sonoboy. Uses Cert Manager and Open Policy Agent. So all of those things are packaged into this one distribution that's free to download. You don't even need to provide an email address. You can just download it and off you go. Another interesting thing was around Tanzu Mission Control, which is their SaaS-based management portal for Kubernetes clusters, not just Tanzu, but also EKS and AKS and GKE. They now have a starter edition for it. So it's still SaaS-based, but I think it will be a limited set of features where you can maybe attach your clusters. There is a registration page for it. I did register for it. I'm waiting on getting access, so I'll let the community know when we try it out and see what features are included. Other things on my list are just VMware Cloud with Tanzu services. So VMware Cloud has been VMware's like infrastructure as a service offering with different public cloud vendors like AWS and Azure and Google Cloud. This is just providing or enhancing that service with the ability to run Tanzu. So if you're running vSphere with Tanzu on-prem inside your own data center, you can now consume Tanzu services on your VMware cloud environments as well. And it comes with TKG and Tanzu Mission Control Essentials tier. So again, some different form of management. And then one last thing that I wanted to highlight was vSAN 7 Update 3. I know we hinted at that in the last episode, but we got more details around it. Like it does support Kubernetes topology parameters for stretch clusters. But one gotcha there is it only works for upstream Kubernetes right now. No real support for VMware Tanzu. So if you are running VMware Tanzu, you might have to wait for the next update. But again, still a cool feature. And then one thing that I'm looking forward to learning more about is Project Cascade. So Cascade allows VMware to build a control plane for deploying infrastructure as a service and container as a service platforms. So again, I'm still looking for more details. If anybody out there knows more details about Cascade, please reach out and I would love to talk more about this. But yeah, that's it for me. That's it for VMworld.
Wow, lots of things going on there. It sounds like Community Edition along the same lines of like EKS Anywhere and those kind of distributions that come out. It really help onboard folks to the platform. So yeah, lots to learn there, lots to unpack. It sounds like I have a lot of reading to do.
And we have KubeCon next week. So yeah, it's just going to get exponential.
So there's three things that were on my list I wanted to mention this week, which two of them were CNCF presentations. One on Kanister, which is a framework actually from the Kasten folks, the Kasten Veeam folks, around sort of solving operational requirements between applications and Kubernetes when it comes to backup and recovery workflows. So, this is really about understanding the individual workloads when it comes to using tools that allow you to do things that may be a little more custom for your environment, such as run specific, commands or freeze operations or database dumps and those kind of things. All very important stuff when you're running stateful workloads. So really cool presentation. I enjoyed learning a lot there. And then the other one was about OpenEBS 3.0. So a lot of new stuff around Jiva, CStore, and local PVs and Maya Store, as well as some glimpses into 4.0. Both of those presentations were great. Definitely go check those out. And then the last one was sort of big news. We follow StorageOS quite a bit, since they're very close to what we do day to day at our jobs, and they rebranded to Ondat. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but that's a whole new sort of branding and focus for StorageOS. So really interested to see where that goes in the community, and that's really all I had for the news. One thing we did want to mention was this episode will come out the week of KubeCon. So we won't be discussing KubeCon until the following episode. So if you're listening to this episode during KubeCon or around KubeCon, we will have a KubeCon update post this episode.
And I'm pretty sure that will be just like a news episode, like A to Z, like what's going on with all the different vendors.
Yeah.
And I'll be there in person. So again, if you're listening to this during the week of KubeCon, if you're there, just say hi. I'll be at the Portworx booth. And I'll let you know if the StorageOS booth says StorageOS or Ondat.
There you go. You never know. Yeah, I will be in the virtual booth. So if you do stop by virtually to KubeCon, come by the booth there and come say hello. I have a couple office hours where you can see me in person if you want.
That's like full coverage right there.
Great. So let's dive into our topic, which is, as a reminder, scaling Kubernetes as a team of one. Let's get Kai on the show. All right, Kai, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here on Kubernetes Bytes. Thanks for coming.
Oh, it's great to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so today's topic, as we sort of introed, was scaling Kubernetes as a team of one. But before we dive into that, let's learn a little bit about you and your background with Kubernetes, or just as a person.
Sure. So I suppose I'm what you'd call a jack of all trades, master of none engineer. Like, I love learning the new things up to a point where I can be dangerous with them, and then put them down and learn something else. So I'm not what you'd call an expert in any one area, but I suppose Kubernetes has been the thing for the last 5 years that I've just constantly been using. I didn't set out to think I want to really master Kubernetes. It just became, something I kept hitting from different angles and coming across. So, that kind of experience through exposure might be how you call that. But before Kubernetes, or BK, I suppose, like 2015, I suppose in my head is that time, right? Software engineer on various different projects, like e-learning software was one of the big things I spent a long time doing back in the days of Flash. I'm sure people remember that. And desktop publishing company. I did a whole kind of multi-user server thing for a company that did desktop publishing software that was moving their kind of Windows software onto a web version, and various other kind of my just before we moved to Kubernetes era, my proudest project before was a Perl system that ran an intranet for an events company. I wrote that in 2001 in Perl, and it's still running. And I know this because when it doesn't work, I know about it. But I'd say I put about maybe an hour a year maintenance into that thing, and it just sits there running. But since 2015 and containers arrived, and I've been working with various companies, mainly in the stateful kind of like anything that has anything to do with saving stuff to disk and containers has been a pattern, it seems. But also lots of marketing departments, as well as software engineering roles, a combination of the two. I think really in this world, if you're in a marketing department, you kind of have to be a software engineer. You can't wave your hands. It's more than just marketing speak. You have to speak the language and therefore have done the things that you're speaking about. But I kind of enjoy the marketing roles because you get to talk about things and, have a bit more fun than sat there coding on a computer all day. Yeah. So I've enjoyed all the conferences and that kind of stuff. I think the subject of what we're speaking about today is like lots of various side projects that I'm involved with doing, or side gigs as I like to call them. And all of these are running on a single GKE cluster. And sort of various different things. One, like I'll go through some of them. Like one of them is a website publishing system that builds websites from Google Docs.
Okay.
Wow.
Another is a franchise a management system. It's like an intranet for franchises, and various other, both exciting and boring projects that all need to run somewhere, right?
Are all these applications like you started from scratch and running on Kubernetes, or something you had to morph into containers or modernize them basically?
Good question. I mean, I'll say the dreaded words. WordPress is one of them, so that definitely counts as a morph. And yes, we've got WordPress running on Kubernetes, and no, it was not designed to do that.
So all the demos that we as TMEs do actually have an impact in the real world. Like the most common demo application is WordPress.
Yeah, totally right. Totally right. In fact, I'll be honest, I'm fairly sure I've used some of these sort of how to run WordPress on Kubernetes demos when I was trying to do it for real,
Nice.
But I kind of like it, I love that moment that you chat with somebody, oh, I've got this thing going on, but how are we going to run it? How are we going to build it? And I'm just like, well, I could handle that for you, and that I think is the lead on to the thread of this conversation. Is what I'm really saying is I've got this magic tool that you don't know about, right? That I can just like throw some configuration at and then forget about it. And 5 years later, it's all still there.
That's great.
So you mentioned this was a single GKE cluster.
Yes.
And that to me is already a very interesting topic, just because so you have many projects running in the same Kubernetes cluster, assuming they're all in different namespaces. So how does Kubernetes itself allow you to do this when you don't have like a full DevOps team or engineering team behind you?
Yeah, good question. I think like most important thing is probably this, like the fact it just standardizes the API for all the primitives, right? And something I've always enjoyed explaining to people who are less technical, because a lot of the people I collaborate with on all these projects are not they may be technical people, like they are engineers and they're coders, but they're more of the kind of like, I know how to make the thing appear on the screen type coders, as opposed to the like, where does it actually happen in the real world? As in, like, all we're doing is tricking rocks into thinking with lightning world, right? I love that quote. That's not mine. But the standardized API for these three primitives, storage, networking, and compute. And when you explain to people, like, look, all of this cloud stuff, all these complicated arrays of different services, like AWS, hundreds of things that you can do. And it all boils down to some arrangement of those three primitives in the end of the day. Like, let's call TPUs compute, and there's some slight variances on these things, but it's just, where do I save the data? How do I get that data to somewhere to do some calculations? And rinse and repeat is all of these things once you boil it down, right? And Kubernetes gives you those primitives in the easiest form, as in, once you learn about deployment services, ingress, and persistent volumes, you're just like, cool, I can now put together all of these different stacks in a way that I literally did the same thing to another project yesterday. This other project was completely different languages. And that's another thing to mention. Like, all of these projects are different languages. So, okay, yeah, I've got a way to put this together. Like, why don't you just run it on VMs if you're just a small outfit? Is the kind of counter argument to scaling with Kubernetes as a team of one, right? And the answer is, like, show me the way that I'm going to run Go, Node, Python, Perl, PHP, 3 types of different databases on one VM when I don't worry about dependencies. And the answer is obviously Docker and containers, right? Awesome. So it's like, that's why containers are brilliant, is you just get to go, I don't need to worry about the environment that this app needs to run in anymore. And that is a godsend. So then you say, great, I've got containers. I can run lots of things on one machine. And then you go, but one machine isn't enough. So what do we do now? And, going back to 2018, there was a little phase where the answer was Swarm or Kubernetes or Mesos. There was sort of the 3 things in there. And then Docker basically said, okay, fine, we lose. It's Kubernetes. We're going to bundle Kubernetes with our thing now. And so it standardized it. And so the real answer to that whole world is, if you just want to run things and you don't have the time, because that's sort of the point, is you don't have the time to really think about it, or dare I say, in some cases, care. You just want to run it, right? You need it to be more than one machine, because vertical scaling always has a limit. And with this, you can just keep going. What other tool can coordinate containers across more than one machine? And it's Kubernetes in a nutshell. So the fact that it's the go-to choice for that solution, and the fact that it standardizes the APIs for these primitives, I think that's the really low-level answer. The high-level answer is, I just don't have to think about it.
So now we know, like, the benefits of why running on Kubernetes makes sense, and all the different languages that you can run on the same cluster. But like, how do you talk about your development pipeline? Like, how do you get things developed and pushed into Kubernetes, and how do you operate and manage your Kubernetes GKE clusters?
Sure.
Like, what tools do you use?
Yeah, good question. So each project will have its own namespace. There's potentially a stateful component in it. I run a centralized Postgres on the Kubernetes cluster. It's worth mentioning, because basically, because I'm a cheapskate, and GKE RDS, like whatever the GKE, the Google Cloud RDS thing is called, like managed Postgres, is expensive, right? So I'm just like, well, I'll make a PV for Postgres. I'll set it on an hourly backup schedule. And the Postgres is fixed on a node taint and a node selector. So there's like one database node in the cluster, and there's 3 other worker nodes, right? So let's just push that to one side, like the Postgres angle. Most of the apps use Postgres. Some of them use MySQL. There's a Mongo in there, because why, I don't know, but there is. I didn't choose it. It's like, we need to run this app for someone. But I suppose what I'm saying is, there's a stateful node, just because then in my head, I'm like, that's the one amount of separation I want to keep between. I can scale up the stateless stuff. The stateful thing is a case of, like, all the databases run on there and nothing else. And but if that node goes away, everything would come back because they're all on PVs on an hourly backup schedule, and I don't need to worry about that node. It feels a bit like a pet, but with insurance, you know.
Nice.
Because it is a single thing. It's right. So let's put like if the thing needs Postgres, I've already got that running in the Postgres namespace. So I wouldn't need to instantiate a new Postgres server. I would just create a new database on my existing Postgres database, and then put the access credentials like the username and password into a secret in the namespace. Once you've done that, the question is, how do I build the containers and deploy them? Right. So it's literally only 3 things do I ever use. It's deployment, it's service, and it's ingress. And with those 3 things, almost all of the apps use those. I mentioned secrets. Okay, 4 things. There's secrets as well for the environment to go into the deployment. So GitLab is the main workhorse of getting this stuff done, because push to GitLab, run the tests. In GitLab, we've got Docker Compose stacks to run the tests because it's sort of integration level test. I'm going to go on a slight divergence for a second. I'm a bigger fan of integration and acceptance tests than I am of unit tests. Yes, I write unit tests, but like the big important question for me is like, you know, if the app is a box with a button on it, and the point of the app is when you press the button, the light turns on. The test that really matters for me is if I push that button, does the light come on? Right. So anyway, I'm not going to go down a testing rabbit hole. This is not this podcast, but run those tests on GitLab. Then they pass. The next step would be having built the images. I missed that step. Build the images, run the tests. Now what do? Push the images to GCR, the container registry on Google.
On Google.
Last step is just patch the image now in the deployments. So I'll manually set up the services, the ingress, the namespace, and the initial deployment, such that something's running, I can see that it's working. And then from that moment, every push to GitLab after the test pass, all it's really doing is replacing the image tag in there.
Okay.
I think in some cases, of course, like I'll be updating some environment variables, and in which case it's just push the environment variables there. But in terms of like 99% of the how do I get new code out there is push to GitLab, build the images, after the test pass, update the image tag in the existing deployment. I almost went down GitOps land, and I'm a fan of GitOps. Like, I like GitOps as a concept. It's great. But what am I trying to say here? One core reason for using Kubernetes as a team of one is because it has to be simple, because you don't have the time or resources to go down rabbit holes. So I've attempted to use the simplest tools, often the most primitive tools when possible. And GitOps to me feels like an awesome idea when you've got the kind of like theoretical future of needing to unpick the history and understand what happens. In my world, I'm just like, right, push the new one then. So now in no way am I having an opinion over what should larger teams do. I'm just saying I've found that to be an excellent system because there's very few moving parts.
Yeah, as a team of one, you don't need to have overhead processes to just slow you down.
You got it. Exactly. That's well said, Bhavin.
I have 2 brief follow-up questions. Before we get too far away from where I've tracked them in my head. One is, you said you have a backup schedule for once every hour. I'm curious how you came to the decision that 1 hour of every 1 hour was good enough for your customers or your processes. And then the second question was around, a lot of this seems to be bundled in Google Cloud. So your PVs, your data, your backups, likely, and your images. Are you ever concerned about needing to move to another cloud, and or is it not even in a thought right now?
No, those are 2 really good questions. So on the first question, the fact is, like, if I'm just going to say it. The fact is, if I was Facebook, losing an hour's data wouldn't be very good. But then we speak on this podcast the day after they were down for 6 hours. Exactly, right? So I actually didn't think of saying that. I was just going to say Facebook, and then it's obvious, right? But like for me, saying to a customer, look, we've had a terrible outage. We're really, really sorry. Sometimes things go wrong, guys. You have lost the last hour's worth of data. That's the worst case scenario, right? that would be okay for me with the most valuable customers that we run stuff. And people pay money for this for these things. It's not all just like hobby stuff, right?
Yeah.
But none of them are like mission critical. Oh my God, everything went. Lives are not in danger, and livelihoods are not in danger if an hour's worth of data is lost.
Yeah, Facebook lost like billions of dollars. I doubt like you are running those workloads.
Really not. Yeah,
it's a risk of cost and reality.
Exactly. It's a risk reward analysis comes to the conclusion that 1 hour is a good amount of time. And of course, let's bear in mind 1 hour is the worst case scenario here. Let's average it out. It's like on average 30 minutes worth. It's really not starting to sound that terrible. And the sorts of apps that we run are mainly content publishing apps. So now what we have to do is look at the write profile of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not every second there's tens of thousands of rows coming in. It's literally every hour there's maybe one or none, right? So I think we're okay on that basis. And again, dare I say, the whole theme of this thing comes with a little sprinkle of pragmatism. Otherwise, you can very easily go down to cap theorem on that question, and you're not going to have a nice life. If you're worrying as a team of one thinking about cap theorem on backups, then oh no, how are we going to ever, does that make sense?
So do you just back up your persistent volumes, or do you back up like the whole application, like the deployments and the ingress and the services that you mentioned?
Good question. So I know there are tools around that back up whole namespaces of everything. I don't have that much worry because everything that an app needs to deploy itself to Kubernetes, it has a deploy folder within the repo.
Right.
Okay.
So the only thing missing there would be secrets. So what I do is every time I update the secrets, I push an encrypted version of those secrets up to a storage bucket such that if the worst happened and the whole cluster went away, right, we've got the volumes backed up in, I think it's object store, and I think I've got it set so it's multi-region. So, if the worst happened to a region, then we've not actually lost any data. So we've got the disks themselves. We've got the secrets that we need to put back in there. Everything else is in the GitHub repo because that's just configuration in the form of Kubernetes manifest. So what I've not thought about is time to recovery. So it is true that, oh no, disaster strikes. Other people would be faster to recover using cleverer tools. That is true. But in my world, I'm just like, okay, that's never happened. B, if it did happen, it would be a matter of a few hours. And, last time we say this, as we've just been demonstrated, like that's okay, apparently, even if you're the very biggest platform in the world. No, I'm only joking there. We'll stop there. But yes, no, it's a good question. The answer is no. There's no automatic restoring of everything.
Gotcha.
It would be a manual process of restoring things. And again, it's a bit like, okay, we could easily probably go down a few days at least of going, I want that automatic restoring feature. I've just not got round to it yet. And I think potentially there's an effort reward ratio analysis going on there.
But at the same time, it's you still want to keep things simple. You are a team of one, right? So adding yet another tool and needing to possibly maintain it and make sure it's working right is just
And like this also helps people who are looking to just get started, right? They don't need to boil the ocean. They just need to start with something simple and make sure it works for their application. And then if they want to scale their application or their team, they can bring in these additional tools. So
totally correct. And I think that is the exact pragmatism that you need when you start off, because otherwise it's so easy to get lost and you almost get incapacitated with all of the options. So you end up doing nothing. It's like, I don't know where to go. Like too much to think about. As well as just create a simple path, go down that path. Oh, now I'm cold. Okay, now I might think about getting a coat. Whereas before you even think about walking on the path, Amazon coats, there's 10,000. Oh, I'm just going to give up. It's easy stuff. Ryan, what was your second question? Because it was a good question.
The second question
about hourly backup schedule of why an hour. What was the other one?
Yeah, the second one was really about putting all your eggs in one basket around GKE Google.
Yes. Yeah, I think the answer there is there's nothing like. It's a really good question. If I was using TPUs, for example, right? I'm going to use all their really clever stuff or BigQuery or all of these sorts of things, then I would be maybe a bit worried about vendor lock-in, which I think we can call this concept cloud lock-in, more than vendor, right? Because then, Google are known to switch stuff off. You know, it's like it's not an alien concept that they just turn around and go, yeah, we're losing the cloud wars. We're just going to switch off the whole thing. That could happen. Let's face it.
There was an article, right? Like 5 years, like Google Cloud gave themselves 5 years. If they don't crack it higher in the list, they'll just call it a day.
Just switch it off. Like, why not? So if that happens, and I'm locked in, I'd be worried right now. I would read that article and I'd be thinking, as a team of one, oh no, I've made the wrong decisions. Fact is, everything's standard, right? So everything is just Kubernetes API plus, like, any cloud worth its salt will give you PVs and some kind of backup schedule for those PVs and some kind of object store. And that's it. There's nothing else that I'm using in Google that is
specific to the cloud.
Exactly. And I think for that reason, it kind of comes back to the what happens if disaster occurs and how quickly would we restore. It would be a certain amount of manual, okay, let's move this to there and let's plug that into this now, but it would be okay, and it wouldn't be a horrendous exercise. It would just be a bit annoying. And I have to say, like, Google Cloud is excellent in terms of UX for a single person, right? And compared to all the other clouds, like, it just shines. And I've spoken to a number of people about this, and AWS is much better than Google Cloud. Okay, cool, but where are you coming from there? Oh, I'm a kind of business guy. Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, because it is AWS really nails it for the person spending the money, right? But for the engineer, the person that's actually got to use the thing. I mean, AWS is great. I don't think I'm comparing them. It's just, as an engineer, you can tell Google Cloud was written by real engineers for engineers. Right. And so from my perspective, I just prefer that experience.
Yeah, I've had every time I've used GK, it's always just like to the point of being simple. Like, things just work. Things just get started and you're like, oh, I'm already running ahead of time, right? With everything you try to do. It's a good lead in, I think, to the next question is, you know, have you had any lessons learned developing this scenario? Did you start with other technologies, other clouds? You know, I heard you say you run a single Postgres instead of multiple Postgres. Is like, are there any lessons learned around just
I mean, the first thing would be that keep it simple, stupid, because it sounds all enticing. Oh, but what if your Postgres goes down? And the fact is, Kubernetes will just bring it back up again. So yes, there's 30 seconds to a couple of minutes where Postgres isn't there, and yes, all your apps will blow up, and yes, your monitoring will tell you that. Second thing, have monitoring, even if even if Kubernetes says, "Oh, I'm going to look after it," like, know that it's doing that job. Prometheus and Grafana. I mean, Kubernetes comes with so much out of the box Prometheus metrics. Like, you don't basically need anything else than the standard. Hey, Kubernetes node exporter plus Grafana. Boom, you know everything that's going on your app now, right? And so install that and use it. I always do. And the reason there is another lesson. Oh my God, this is really important. Like, always add resource limits to your manifests.
There you go.
Very true.
Don't do the cowboy thing that I started off like, I don't even know what memory or CPU profile this thing's going to use. So I'm just going to just do what you want kind of thing. And then let that build up, and it will become a problem. So, because then you're essentially looking at the Grafana, which is why to have Grafana. Why is everything slow? Oh, it's because that thing is eating everything. Why is it eating everything? Because I didn't put any limits on it. And so all of a sudden, essentially, think of that like Kubernetes without resource limits, like a navigator without a map, you know?
Sure.
It's like, I could do an excellent job for you, but if you don't tell me where, I have no idea what to do here. So resource limits essentially is very, very important. That's definitely a lesson I learned. I think I had this note to tell you. Read Kubernetes the Hard Way by Kelsey Hightower, right? And then use a cloud provider to do it for you. That's definitely a lesson, because it's really good to understand everything that's going on under the hood. Like, oh, there's a control server and there's an API server and there's a kubelet and they will communicate in this way. And great. Like, it's kind of interesting. If no other reason, just read it because it's fun stuff. Like,
well, you're supporting this platform at the same time you are trying to just run it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. And then once you've read that, just click a button on Google Cloud as the conclusion.
Okay, so that's a great way to get started. How can people who are just hearing about Kubernetes for the first time get to where you are, and what are the other tools that they should look out for, or the other training modules that are available for them?
So I would go and hit up Katacoda step one, because like I think we probably all know Ben, who runs Katacoda. Yep. He's a great guy, and also it's just such a great resource. Like, go and use the thing without having to worry about how to get to the first stage of typing commands in. So there's nothing better than going, I had to not do anything other than sign up for a Katacoda session, and now I can type kubectl a thing and it's just there, and all of a sudden the Explorer part of you takes over and you start poking around, and at which point then you're going to want to know, well, kubectl what? Yep. And then Katacoda should guide you through that. Next thing, there's an infinite number of resources on Google for, hey, here is the basics of Kubernetes, here's how you interact with deployments and services and ingress and PVs and etc. So the most important thing is to not have to worry about provisioning yourself a cluster in order to interact with one, right? And once you've got to there, then the next stage should be, what do I actually want to do with it? Now, it might just be, I want to learn how it all works. There might not be an end goal of, I want to run something, in which case, knock yourself out. Like, just install all the operators there are and install everything and see what happens. If there is a case of, oh, but I need actually to do something with this tool, then just get the thing that you need to happen done. Don't follow all of the other rabbit holes. And so another thing I wanted to say is, don't go down the operator and CRD rabbit hole if you're trying to run something. You know, like like a lot of them are brilliant. Like crunchy data Postgres operator, for example, excellent code quality, out of this world. Like, and if you're really serious about, you know, we've got teams of hundreds of developers and we need them all just to have Postgres on demand, then that kind of tool is going to really be the way that you achieve that. But if you're a single person looking to just get a Postgres set up, but you choose, oh, therefore I need the operator and the CRD just to spin up a deployment, that's going to hurt you, because there's so many abstractions now away from what's actually going on. So first, like in terms of tools to get started, things like Katacoda, things like, you know, dare I say GKE, because it'll give you $300 to start off. Like, just spin a cluster up and interact with it and poke it and see what happens. Then you should move to, like, now I actually want to get something set up, strip it all back and do not go down all of the shiny lights path, because there's so many lovely tools there that are really useful and absolutely essential when you get to the stage of needing them. But if you've not thought to yourself, I really need that tool because this is the problem I have that it solves, just ignore it for a minute, because you don't need it. And that's, I think, from my personal perspective, from this angle, having also worked in teams that manage large clusters where it's totally different to what I'm saying, to be clear. Like, but when my neck is on the line, when that tool doesn't work, and I don't know how it works because I just went with the fact that it would just work, it's going to be really horrible. And I have been there, like, you know, installing various operators for a thing where actually you just need to install the thing. So I think my advice there would be, another thing is to really solidify that. Basically, every single one of the deployments on my Kubernetes stack is just a deployment service plus ingress, like plus potentially the PV. But as I've said, most of them just speak to the existing Postgres. So in the namespace the app runs, it doesn't have any stateful thing at all. It's just the deployment for front end and API, the service so the networking can reach those things, and the ingress for the world getting to them. A tool. This is like almost an advert, just because I love it so much, right? Cert Manager, install Cert Manager. Absolutely. Like, that thing is just incredible. The idea, like, that you had to pay somebody to get a TLS certificate sent to you by email just sounds so archaic now. Cert Manager exists. You know, the idea that you can just like throw an ingress record at the cluster and 30 seconds later TLS is working, like, it's just brilliant. And, and it's worth saying, actually, like, for a single person, just going from 0 to running app in about 5 minutes is that sort of stack where you just go, I'm going to copy a deployment manifest from somewhere else. I'm going to copy the service manifest from somewhere else. And I'm going to grab the ingress record from somewhere else, change the domain name, basically not have to change anything else, and throw those 3 manifests at a cluster, and your app is up and running. And it's an incredible feeling when that works. And then 4 years later, it's still doing that. And all you've ever had to do is git push to GitLab, and the whole thing works. Now, for a team of one for small apps. There's the caveat.
Yeah,
Nice.
of course.
Right. Just saying.
And we're gonna have to like collect all of these. We'll include in the show notes all the links to the things that you're referencing, so that
Sure.
folks that are listening, if they're interested in getting started with any of these things, we'll have those listed. And maybe even if you want to throw some others that we didn't even talk about today, I think that would be great. As the last question we'll ask you is, you have a lot of great experience here, and you've done a lot of cool work. Is there any way people can get a hold of you or look at the work you've done? Is it GitHub, Twitter?
Sure, yeah. I've got GitHub, Bino Carlos, BINOCARLOS. People often ask me why that name. It sounds like binoculars. It's not that. I once was doing a job with some. It's a funny story. I was in New York for a summer, painting Madonna's house after she just moved out.
Oh wow!
With some of my friends from South America, and they could not say Kai. Right? It's like Kaki, okay. And he says, you can be Carlos for the summer. So I kind of enjoyed that, and I've just used that as my internet handle. Why Bino? I don't know. I just kind of made up a name for it.
How did we not talk about this in the intro?
Yeah,
well, I know. Yeah.
What a tidbit right at the end there.
I know. That was a cool summer.
Sounds it.
I was just on holiday bored, right? So I was just and Twitter is Kai_Davenport. I don't really do LinkedIn.
That's fine.
I don't really tweet, to be honest, but yes.
So GitHub's the way to go if
GitHub,
you want to check out some stuff. Well, Kai, I will say I've learned a lot from you today, and this is saying a lot. I feel like I've worked with you at various gigs too, and I always learn something new every time I talk to you. So it's maybe you are the most interesting man in the world for me. I don't know, but it's been wonderful to have you on the show, and maybe in the future we can have you back to talk about some of those other topics,
sure.
Such as testing, that could be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. I stopped myself going down that rabbit hole. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, Ryan, Bhavin. Thank you so much, and it's really great you're running this podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for like coming on and sharing your thoughts.
Of course, awesome, guys.
Well, I don't know about you, Bhavin, but I feel like I learned a lot from Kai just now. I haven't actually run my own endeavors on Kubernetes myself, but I think if I were to start today, I'd probably take out a lot of what we learned today. I don't know about you.
I know, like I have only met Kai once before this recording, and I was like, man, this guy knows so many things and has to be on top of everything to make sure that he's writing code for different customers, deploying their applications, operating them, managing them. So like it's all just like one person, right? So we definitely had good or great key takeaways from this recording. So I'm really happy.
Yeah, agreed. So I think to recap those, right, the obvious one is using that KISS methodology, right? Keep it simple, stupid. And I really like that term just because the reality is what we kept hearing is, when you're only one person, you can really only take on that much. So keeping it simple actually makes you more productive in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Like he didn't have any complex CI/CD or GitOps workflows. He just, since he was the only one responsible for deploying or pushing code to production, he knew where things were and was ready for all scenarios. So like instead of just getting drowned by all the marketing around how you can optimize developer or DevOps workflows, he just kept it simple. And he has been running things for like 5 years now on GKE. Isn't that what he said?
I think it was 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the lessons learned, I think, were good to hear. Right, use quotas. I know I'm personally guilty of doing this when we work on demos and things like that. Yep. I'll just launch anything. I won't really pay attention to the quotas. I mean, given that our stuff isn't up for that long and we tear it down, it's probably okay. But yeah, you run the stuff in production, you're gonna want to use these things. And really, the goal there is to save yourself a headache down the road. You are only one person yet again. So
and then like to tie with quotas, he also highlighted you should have monitoring systems. So if you don't have quotas for certain services, you can identify them and change things if needed.
Yeah, or both, right?
Yeah, true.
And then some of the other ones I took out from this was, his use of Postgres as sort of a central component. Even though he ran it on Kubernetes, he wasn't running a bunch of Postgres service. It was still one, even though it was deployed as a container. Around backups and sort of his RPO and RTO techniques, I think as a team of one, right, some of those things that he worked out with his customers, like taking backups every hour, made a lot of sense. His take on expectations of his customers for RTO times, like there is a certain sense of like, yes, it's paid for, but at the same time, I am a person of one running this stuff. So it really sort of ties into, you work on those things with your customers based on the type of application, the type of workload. He didn't say that these were like transactional applications happening, millions of records every minute or something. It was like, pretty small amount of data. And then multi-cloud wise, right? That adds a lot of complexity. So I think his strategy of, let me use these great abstractions from Kubernetes and focus on those abstractions rather than the specific cloud, so that if I needed to, I could, right? Not that it would be dead simple where he's at right now, but that was actually an interesting take on it, which made sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like doing that episode with him, there's a quote that I listened to. Again, it's a lame quote, but it's like if you look around like all your parks and cities, there are no statues for committees. Like a single person is really powerful and can do a lot of things if like you follow a great workflow and have some structure in place. So I think, or I feel that listeners can really learn many important aspects around deploying and learning about Kubernetes from this episode. So I'm really pumped.
Agreed. Well, I think that wraps it up. As a reminder, anyone listening to this episode, please take the time to review us. It helps us in the long run, or send us a message on Anchor, and review anywhere you can and where you listen to your podcast. Exciting stuff on our next episode, though. We did mention you were headed off to KubeCon in person, and I'll be at the virtual booth. Our next episode, which will be 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
2 or 3 weeks from now, will all be about KubeCon. So pretty much an entire KubeCon recap. Really exciting stuff.
I know. I'm looking forward to that one.
All right. Well, that is all for today, folks. And until next time, take care. Thank you for listening to the Kubernetes Bytes podcast.